Good evening, and thank you for joining me for this report on the most significant U.S. financial, political, and world news from the past 7 days. It's been a dynamic week, with markets reacting to trade developments, political shifts shaping domestic and international agendas, and global events raising both concerns and opportunities. Let's dive in, starting with the financial landscape. U.S. financial news. Markets rally amid trade, hopes, and strong economic data. The U.S. financial markets have been a focal point this week, with Wall Street posting gains driven by a mix of robust economic indicators and signs of easing trade tensions. On Friday, May 2nd, the S&P 500 marked its 9th consecutive session of gains, matching a streak not seen since 2004, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average hit a 9-day winning streak, its longest since December 2023. All three major U.S. stock indexes, S&P 500, Dow, and Nasdaq, advanced over 1%, with sectors like financials, transportation, and microchips outperforming. This rally was fueled by a strong U.S. jobs report, which showed the economy added 177,000 jobs in April, surpassing estimates of 133,000, while wage inflation remained below consensus, easing concerns about overheating. A key driver of market optimism was the potential de-escalation of U.S.-China trade tensions. Reports emerged that China is open to tariff negotiations, with Beijing considering offers to address fentanyl exports as a bargaining chip. President Trump's partial reversal of some tariffs also helped the S&P 500 recover from earlier losses, triggered by his April Liberation Day tariff announcement. However, the threat of a 10% blanket tariff on U.S. imports continues to loom, with the EU proposing to increase purchases of U.S. goods by $56 billion to mitigate its impact. Companies like Apple and Amazon are already grappling with tariff-related costs, which could affect consumer prices if unresolved. Big tech earnings were another highlight, with 180 S&P 500 companies, including Apple, Amazon, Meta, and Microsoft, reporting quarterly results. While these reports were broadly positive, megacaps like Nvidia, down 2.1%, and Amazon, down 0.7%, weighed on the Nasdaq earlier in the week, reflecting investor caution ahead of these crucial earnings. Meanwhile, Tesla faced challenges, with sales plunging 81% in Sweden and across Europe due to competition from Chinese EVs and protests against CEO Elon Musk's political views. On the downside, economic concerns persist. A Reuters poll indicated that 3/4 of economists cut their 2025 global growth forecast to 2.7% from 3.0%, citing Trump's tariffs as a major drag on business sentiment. The U.S. GDP unexpectedly fell in the first quarter, and incoming shipments to the Port of Los Angeles dropped 36% year over year, signaling potential slowdowns. These mixed signals suggest that while markets are buoyant now, tariff policies and global trade dynamics could pose risks in the coming months. U.S. political news. Trump's first 100 days and domestic tensions. Politically, the U.S. has been navigating the turbulent early days of President Donald Trump's second term, which began in January 2025. Trump has marked his first 100 days with a flurry of executive orders aimed at downsizing the federal government, reshaping U.S. global trade, and delivering on campaign pledges. His administration proposed a $163 billion cut to the federal budget, including $3.2 billion for the World Bank's Fund for the Poorest Countries, reflecting a focus on domestic priorities. However, these moves have sparked controversy, with critics like Warren Buffett and former Vice President Kamala Harris questioning their economic and social impacts. Harris, in her first major public remarks since her 2024 election loss, hinted at future political plans, suggesting Democrats are eyeing a comeback amid Trump's polarizing policies. Trump's tariff policies have also drawn domestic backlash. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned that broad tariffs could raise consumer costs and harm the economy, while federal judges have ruled against the administration in dozens of cases, leading to reported threats against at least 11 jurists, families. A notable ruling by Judge Beryl Howell rebuked Trump's pressure campaign against law firms he accused of weaponizing the justice system, highlighting tensions between the executive and judiciary. On the legislative front, House Republicans are exploring tax deduction limits for high earners, a move that could reshape fiscal policy but risks alienating wealthy constituents. Meanwhile, a U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal, signed after months of negotiations, grants the U.S. access to critical resources in exchange for aid, aligning with Trump's resource-focused foreign policy. The administration also approved two military aid packages for Ukraine, valued at $50 million and $310 million, signaling continued support despite Trump's emphasis on reducing overseas commitments. Social issues remain contentious. Demonstrators at May Day protests expressed anger over Trump's agenda, while a hate crime case in Illinois, where a landlord was sentenced to 53 years for killing a 6-year-old Muslim boy in 2023, underscored ongoing challenges with communal tensions. These developments reflect a polarized political landscape as Trump's policies reshape the national conversation. World news, trade talks, conflicts, and global shifts globally, the week was dominated by trade negotiations and escalating regional tensions. The U.S.-China trade war remains a central issue, with China signaling openness to talks but warning against extortion. The EU and Japan are also maneuvering, with the latter hinting at leveraging its U.S. Treasury holdings in future negotiations. These dynamics have rippled across markets, with the Taiwan dollar surging 3% on Friday, its largest single-day gain since 1988 amid thawing U.S. China tensions and strong big tech earnings. In Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky and Trump agreed on a 30-day ceasefire with Russia as a step toward peace, though Russia's Dmitry Medvedev warned that Kyiv could face severe consequences if it attacked Moscow during World War II victory celebrations. On May 9th, this fragile truce highlights the ongoing challenge of balancing diplomacy with military realities in the region. In South Asia, India-Pakistan relations hit a new low after a terrorist attack in Pahalgam on April 22nd, claimed by the Resistance Front, a Pakistan-based group. India is tightening financial flows to Pakistan and investigating local suspects, raising fears of further escalation. Meanwhile, India's foreign minister urged U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio to address the attackers of a separate Kashmir incident, signaling New Delhi's assertive stance. In the Middle East, European governments and NGOs demanded that Israel end its over 60-day siege on Gaza, which has blocked food and medicine, exacerbating humanitarian concerns. The region remains volatile, with political issues in Iran and Ukraine also affecting global oil supply forecasts, contributing to a turbulent week for crude prices. U.S. crude fell 1.6% to $58.29 per barrel on Friday, reflecting these uncertainties. Elsewhere, Australia held elections amid cultural traditions like democracy sausage barbecues, while the Holy See prepared for a May 7th conclave following Pope Francis's death on April 23rd. In the UK, a Ugandan UN judge was jailed for over 6 years for forced labor offenses, underscoring global justice issues. These stories, while diverse, reflect the interconnected nature of today's world. Critical reflection and outlook. As we reflect on this week's events, a few themes stand out. Financially, the U.S. economy shows resilience, but tariffs and global trade uncertainties pose risks that could disrupt markets and raise costs for consumers. Politically, Trump's aggressive policy agenda is reshaping the U.S. domestically and internationally, but it's also deepening divisions and inviting judicial pushback. Globally, tentative steps toward trade and peace talks are encouraging, yet regional conflicts and humanitarian crises demand urgent attention. Looking ahead, the outcomes of big tech earnings, ongoing trade negotiations, and political maneuvers in Washington will likely dominate the narrative. As always, we must approach these developments with a critical eye, recognizing that narratives from governments, corporations, or media may not fully capture the complexities at play. The next 7 days promise to be just as eventful, and I'll be back to break it all down. Thank you for listening, and stay informed.